Good evening, everyone. And I want to call the City of Pompano Beach Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for Thursday, December 14th, 2023. We are at 6 p.m. and I'm calling this to order. Martha, please call the roll.
James Bunn.
Present.
Charlotte Burry.
Present.
Joe Zerkouzi.
Present.
Ray Lebomsky. Linda Thomas.
Here.
Dan Yaffe.
I'll be here. Thank you. We have a quorum. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 16th, 2023 meeting?
So move.
Second.
Any additions, corrections, or deletions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Folks, I just want to take a couple of minutes and tell you why we're here and a little bit about the procedure and the process we're going to use. This is the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's made up of 6 members. We all live in Pompano Beach, and most importantly for you, we serve with no compensation. We bring our own sodas, okay? It is myself, the 3 members to my left and the 2 to my right. On my far right is Scott Reale, who represents Development Services and tells us the city's perspective. James Saunders is on my far left. He's the Assistant City Attorney and will give us legal advice. And Martha Lawson, who's a little bit below there and runs the show. You're here because somehow your property doesn't fit within, you think your property doesn't fit within the codes. And this gives you an opportunity to be heard for some sort of relief, whether it's variance, special exception, or temporary permit. I will call the case. I'll have you come to that podium. You will give me your name, last name, spell your last name. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. I'm going to put everybody under oath in just a few minutes. That's where we have to go through some additional questions. So I need your name, spell your last name, your address, and tell me if you've been sworn in. At that point, staff, Mr. Reale tonight, will tell us why we're here. When he's done, you'll have an opportunity to present your entire case, calling any witnesses, bringing out forth any evidence. This is just like a court. You can, as long as it's evidence, you can bring it forward. This is also a public hearing, so at some point, I will ask for any public comment. If the public has any evidentiary hearing, testimony they'd like to bring forward, love to hear it. First, I'll ask for those in support of the applicant. After that, those in opposition. The reason we have public hearings is so that everybody can see what goes on in government, and there are no surprises. You're going to hear everybody's testimony, you're going to see the evidence yourself, you'll see it on the screens, and you'll hear us debate and vote afterwards. Because we're 6 members, in order to prevail, you need to have 5 out of 6 affirmative votes. A simple majority does not win. So we need a supermajority. I hope I've covered everything. If I haven't, when you come up, if you have a question, I can't help your case, but I can answer any procedural and process issues. So with that, I'm going to ask everyone who thinks they might testify, even if you're not 100% sure. I like to swear everybody in at one time, so I'm going to ask you all to please stand and raise your right hand and be sworn in.
Okay, thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. You may all be seated. A couple of housekeeping issues. Item number 1, a special exception for Kaja Properties. That's P&Z 23170007 has requested a postponement to the, bear with me, I've got to find that, my calendar doesn't quite go up there. January 18th at 6 p.m. Scott, I believe this is the second time?
Yes, this is
Talk
their
to me
second
about
and last
advertisement and
opportunity.
fees.
It doesn't need to be advertised again because if it's postponed to a date certain, but should the applicant come back a third time, then it's up to the board at their discretion if they want to continue to postpone, but I believe they're going to be going in January.
Excellent, thank you. So I do request a motion to table this to January 18th or postpone.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to postpone item number 1 to the January 18th meeting at 6 p.m.
Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. So if you're here for the special exception for Kaja Properties, those of you who are here in the audience and possibly those of you who are watching on television and I'm sure you're streaming. Every time someone streams, we get one more person out there. We're going to hear it next month, January 18th. I've said. Second item of housekeeping, we have item number 3, P&Z 2317000010, special exception for family community residence for Augustine Krakow. Due to a public hearing notice requirement, this item is now postponed to January 18th, 2024 ZBA meeting. May I have a motion to confirm this? This is what staff did.
Yes, there was an erroneous noticing error, but just as a formality, it's probably best that the board formally postpone it, and it will be renoticed
Thank you, Scott.
with the correct
You
notice.
need a motion?
Yes, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that item number 3 be postponed until the January 18th, 2024 meeting
Second.
6 p.m.
at 6 p.m.
Thank you. I heard a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Good. So anyone here again for item number 3, special exception for family community residence, Augustine Krakow. We will hear this application also in the January 18th meeting. Excellent. All right, let's move on to, one last housekeeping issue. We're going to take our schedule a little out of order. I'd like a motion to take item number 6, CCDV Holdings variance, and move it ahead of item number 5. That is the special exception for the same applicant, CCDV Holdings. In speaking with staff, we thought, let's get the hard one out of the way. Let's get the do the variance and see where we go from there. So if I could have a motion. Thank you. We have a second, please.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. End of housekeeping. Counselor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spring that on you at the last minute. We didn't have any other way to communicate that, but I know you're perfectly capable of doing that. All right. The first case we're going to hear tonight is item number 2, a major temporary use permit, 20 North Oceanside, owner LLC, and that's P&Z 23-15-000012. Another friendly face.
Yes, happy holidays, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Mike Vondermeulen with Keith. Our address is 301 East Atlantic Boulevard in Pompano Beach, and I have been sworn.
Thank you. Mr. Reale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the board. The applicant landowner is requesting a major temporary permit from the provisions of Chapter 155, Article 4, which are the use standards, and Article 5, which are the development standards of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code, in order to temporarily utilize a parcel for a sales center with associated parking and landscaping without complying with the applicable use and development standards as required by code. This property is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of A1A, which of course is Ocean Boulevard, and East Atlantic Boulevard. The subject property, sometimes referred to as Oceanside Parcel A, is currently leased to the city for public parking. The property has entitlements for a 24-story building consisting of 77 dwelling units and 303 hotel units, as per rezoning ordinance number 2006-38, in conjunction with site plan 06-12000032 and major building design, which is number 15-121000040. These approvals have remained active through a combination of interim use permits, city resolutions, and tolling and extension of development orders via states of emergency issued by the governor through executive order. The applicant is seeking approval to temporarily utilize the northern portion of the site to erect an approximately 6,132 square foot sales center, along with 17 parking spaces and associated landscaping. Access to the site will be from an existing curb cut along A1A. The ZBA has approved quite a number of temporary use permits for sales centers on the Barrier Island in recent years. The applicant's narrative states that the sales center will be required for approximately 12 months while the aforementioned development goes through building permit approval. The southern portion of the parcel of the site is expected to remain as public parking, subject to an updated lease agreement between the city and landowner. There are 7 temporary use permit review standards. These are included in the backup of the staff report. The applicant has addressed each of these, and should the board determine the applicant has provided substantial competent evidence sufficient to satisfy those review standards, staff requests the board include the following 4 conditions as part of the order. 1, obtain all necessary governmental permits and approvals, including building, tree, and zoning compliance permits. 2, substantial compliance with the conceptual site plan submitted with the application. 3, provide hedges and basic landscaping around the sales center and parking area to be approved by the city's urban forester. And the 4th recommended staff condition, if permits for the associated development are not obtained prior to the expiration of this temporary use permit, the applicant must reapply for a new temporary use permit or remove the sales center and replace the affected area with drought-resistant sod. And that concludes staff's report.
Yes, sir.
Is this the old Hojo's property?
Yes. Hojo, yeah, Hojo's Holiday Inn.
Yep.
100
Yes.
years ago was the Howard Johnson.
Yes. So I will be brief, Mr. Chairman. Here's the general location. As you can see, the entire site that you saw in Scott's staff report goes all the way down to the intersection of A1A and Atlantic Boulevard. However, this is going to be an extremely small portion. The rest of the area will remain parking, which is leased to the city, and will remain that way until construction permits are issued. The site itself had been previously used to assist with utility companies, as well as some of the other construction companies that were doing improvements to Bryony Boulevard and A1A. This is a photograph of the site, this northern portion in particular. And here's a site plan. It shows that we're using the existing curb cut. You come in, you have 17 parking spaces. You have the 6,100 square feet sales center. It's only 1 story. And there are also decks, which are the darker brown areas, and a fountain. And, this is, again, is a, sales center for another high-end residential project, very similar to some of the other ones that are out there on the beach. So the sales center will be, very tastefully constructed and maintained and landscaped. I'll conclude my presentation.
Does the board have any questions? This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support of the applicant? If you do, sir? I'm sorry. Hearing none, does anyone in the audience wish to speak in opposition? Okay, if you want to come up, I need you to come up to this podium, please. And I need your name, address, spell your last name, please.
David Bierman. I live in the Sea Monarch, 111 North Pompano Beach Boulevard, which is exactly east of where this sales office is going to be. And my concern is, if you go back to the one where you had this building in there, the one you just had. Thank you. Where that wall is, if you look to the right of that wall, that's our garage entrance and exit, where also the garbage goes in and everything, and it's well below the land of this area. Right now, the runoff of the water goes away from the building. So my concern is, if, when they build this, is the runoff of any water is now going to go into our garage, or is it going to continue to go toward the parking area that's there currently?
You're the perfect person to ask, because you guys do utilities.
although I'm a planner, I'm actually not the civil engineer, but the rest of my team is. Yeah, the site will be designed so that it drains away from your wall. We're required to actually retain all water on site.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else wish to speak in opposition? Hearing none. Closing comments? I'm sorry, come on up. Anybody else want to speak? Come up, sit in the front row, please. This way I can see you. No, come on up.
Hi, my name's Tara Christensen. Last name is spelled Christiansen.
You get a little closer to the mic.
I live at the City Monarch at 111 North Pompano Beach Boulevard, Unit 1114 in Pompano Beach. My question is, they're asking for a sales office now without permits and a renewed development plan that spans over 17 years, and the community hasn't heard those renewals over those 17 years, as well as my understanding is if you don't have permits, how do you build a sales office without knowing what you're selling to people?
Gentlemen, Scott, you may want to answer some of the
Yes,
27
there is an approved site plan, and most recently it was slightly modified by the Architectural Appearance Committee through a major building design in 2015. That hasn't changed, so the building permits will have to comply with the approved site plan and building design.
So if you don't mind me asking a few questions, do the building permits have to, and the plans have to apply to today's standards? Because that was 8 years ago, and that's question one. And question two, if it hasn't been approved since 2015, what is the development's position on how long something can be renewed for and how many times it can be renewed? Because I'm under the impression that it's not 17 years.
Okay, so first question, Florida Building Code standard is whatever, when the permit is filed. So even though the site plan and building design were approved years ago, today's building code,
Great.
structural, all of that has to comply with today's standards.
Yeah.
As far as the extensions, this was a phased development. The Oceanside across the street was the original. This has gone on and for quite some time, but and it's actually in some ways been good for the city because it's provided parking, much needed parking on the barrier island. But we do now have, I understand, a developer that is actively, they have purchased and they are actively going to start with the building and construction permits.
Sure, but how can they go off of plans that were built or approved through site and architectural design in your office from starting 17 years ago and even as early as 8 years ago with with the changes that have occurred in that area, as well as, isn't there limits to your office and how often you can renew plans for periods of time?
There is there's executive orders issued by the governor. If there's a hurricane, for example,
saw
it
those.
tolls the
Yep.
period. So those we have no choice but to honor those. And
The timeline with those extensions through the governor meet your timeline with the approvals? So if I was to add up all that time?
yes, it's tolling. And so part of it was a combination. There was an interim use permit initially for the parking lot.
Yep.
Then there was a resolution by the city to continue that, and then through a series of just these executive orders that you can continue to, and we have no, our city attorney can state that we can't do anything about it. We have to honor these if they
Extensions.
cite, these extensions that come down from the state.
So the plans from 2015, 2016 that we're talking about also take away public street access in those plans that we currently have and will negatively influence the function of our building. And so I'm also concerned what was approved 8 years ago that you guys keep extending very detrimentally affect the actual function of our building, and I can illustrate that in pictures.
Scott, I think this may be something we're going to have to take offline here.
Yeah, we're not here to discuss that. Those
Sure.
entitlements are in place, and
But
We
if-
just
if-
started
if
down
you
that
would.
path, so I figured I'd.
No, and they're great questions.
Thank you.
And I think that, if you would follow up, Scott will give
I
you his
would really
contact
like that.
information.
Yep.
And as I said early in the part of the meeting,
Yep.
this is open government. We want people to see what's going on in the process.
Great.
You're asking great questions.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for participating.
I appreciate a time with you. Thank you.
Does anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Come on up.
My name is Craig Fadem, F-A-D-E-M. I live at the Sea Monarch. I hadn't planned to speak, but based on what Scott said, and I don't know if you want me to speak now or save it for public comments, but I was involved with WCI back in 2005, 2006 when the permitting went on. In fact, I actually sued WCI along with the Sea Monarch for robbing us of our personal enjoyment. At that time, they actually wanted 0 lot line, and they wanted to build this.
Okay, how does that go to this one?
The drawings that WCI showed the Sea Monarch and that we agreed to are not the drawings that they actually submitted in 2006, which we just found out. We just realized when this was, we heard it was sold, and Tara actually got a set of the drawings. Sea Monarch is landlocked. We have Pompano Beach Boulevard to our east, and we have First Street to our south. We have no street to our north or west. And First Street is the exit of our garage, and it's where our trash is picked up. And it's a narrow street. The trash truck has to pull down. They dump the dumpsters or dump the compactor containers, and then they back out the street. Then they have to back out because there's no way for them to turn around. The drawing that WCI submitted in 2006 actually converted it. Right now, Pompano Beach Boulevard is a one-way street east. And the drawing that WCI originally showed us showed an exit from their garage, keeping it one-way street east. But the drawing they submitted made it two ways, where it's entrance and exit from the garage, which would be very unsafe with it. It's not a wide street, and for a trash truck backing up 4 or 5 times a week to pick up our trash, I think is a real safety hazard. And this drawing that you referred to in 2015, 2016 gave the developer to put trees all over the end of First Street after their entrance and exit to their garage with no regard for us at all, which would make it almost impossible for the trash truck to get down and then back out. And I don't know how the one-way street became a two-way street with no hearings or anything, but I related, and they have all said they understand our problem, and they said they will work with us. So we're not really, I just wanted to put it on the record that we have a problem.
This is the WCI building.
This is, pardon?
This is the old WCI building you're talking about.
Originally it was WCI,
Okay.
then Erie Pearl built
This is not the building we're discussing here.
Yes. No, you're talking about the sales building. This is
Right,
the
okay.
actual hotel
We're
and
done.
condos they're
We're done.
building.
This is the only reason you're here, the only reason we're
Okay.
listening is this one. Thank you very much, but we're way off topic now.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak specifically on this temporary permit application? Hearing none. Closing comments.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just so everybody knows, sir, the property was just recently sold within I believe the last year. So the new owner is the one that is moving forward with this. It sounds like the developer has already reached out to the Sea Monarch, and we'll make sure that we work with them. But in reference to the sales trailer, I believe we have met all the criteria for this temporary use. Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing is closed. Board discussion or motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
In P and Z case number 23-15000012, I move that we find that there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all the requirements for granting the temporary use permit be granted and, and the 4 conditions required by staff.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Joe Circuzzi,
Yes.
Ray Labumsky,
Yes.
Linda Thomas,
Yes.
Dan Yaffe,
Yes, you're
and
approved.
James Bunn.
Yes.
Sorry.
Not gonna make me
Sorry.
happy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Item number 3, as you heard before, is will be postponed. Oh, give everybody a chance to clear out. Item number 3 is tabled to next month. Item number 4 will be the next item we're hearing, and that's a variance by Kimberly Villela Perez. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My Spanish is awful. It's P&Z 23-11000019. Is Kimberly Villela Perez here? All right, let's keep this open. We'll call it again at the end because traffic, I know weather isn't good. And we're skipping 5 to go to 6, which will be the new 5, and orange is the new black. So we're up to item number 6, which is the variance for CCDV Holdings, LLC, P&Z 23-11000020. Counselor. I'm sorry, why are you here? And I don't mean that, curious. I'm the owner of the building. Oh, forgive me, I'm looking for, seeing if I had an extra person. You look like an attorney, and I was just. Not an attorney. Okay, I'm not trying to be derogatory. No.
That was good. That was pretty good. Good evening, Chair, members of the board. My name is Matthew Scott. I'm a zoning attorney with the law firm of Greenspoon Martyr with an address of 200 East Broward Boulevard. Here on behalf of the applicant for 6 and 5.
Mr. Reale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're starting with the variance, which is P&Z 23-11000020. The applicant landowner is requesting a variance from Section 155-4209B3A, which are the specialty medical facility standards of the Pompano Beach Zoning Code, in order to allow a specialty medical facility to be located less than 500 feet from an RS zoning district, rather than requiring the facility to be located at least 500 feet from an RS zoning district as required by code. This property is located on the north side of East Sample Road and on the east side of Northeast 13th Terrace. The applicant is proposing an ambulatory surgical center in an existing office building along East Sample Road. The use is considered a specialty medical facility, which requires special exception approval in the B3 zoning district. The applicant has concurrently filed an application for the special exception via P&Z 23-17000011. And one of the use-specific standards for a specialty medical facility requires that the facility be located at least 500 feet from a single-family residential zoning district. The applicant is seeking relief from this code provision because a number of single-family dwellings are located within 500 feet of the subject property. Based on our 500-foot radius map, you'll see that that there are a total of 104 parcels with that RS zoning designation located within 500 feet of the subject property. 82 of those parcels zoned RS are zoned RS4, and they're located north of the subject property, with an additional 22 parcels zoned RS3 located south of the subject property, or south of Sample Road. So it should be noted, though, that the BCA tax folio for the subject property includes a parking lot behind the building. And since the building itself is legally joined with the parking lot, they share the same tax folio ID, staff is compelled to include that parcel when measuring the distance separation. If the parking lot was excluded, fewer RS-zone properties would fall within the 500-foot radius, but relief would still be required. Because of the proximity of the Cresthaven neighborhood south of Sample Road and the Highlands neighborhood north of Sample Road, most, if not all, B3 zone parcels along this stretch of East Sample Road fall within the 500 feet of an RS zoning district. There are 8 variance review standards, and they are included in the backup of this report. The applicant has addressed each of the variance review standards, and should the board determine that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence to satisfy those review standards, staff recommends the board include the following conditions as part of the order. And that is just one condition, and that is to successfully obtain a special exception for a specialty medical facility. I can provide further information on the specialty medical facility as part of that staff report, but I didn't realize we were switching the order, so I didn't provide a lot of detail on the use itself. But again, we are here right now for the variance, which is about the separation distance. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reale. Counselor, I tried to move this, and we're starting to move, and just as a matter of announcement, when we have hearings like this that require variances and special exceptions, it seems to make it a lot easier for everyone if we just do the variance first, and then we do the special exception if it becomes warranted. And that's not to prejudge yours at all. We did it the other way before, and we're just trying to streamline and process this. No prejudice to you.
Thank you for that, Chair. And I understand. I went round and round in my head on what makes the most sense, which to do first. And so I see the logic of putting the variance first because it's sort of the bigger hurdle. So that being said, again, for the record, my name is Matthew Scott, and I represent Revive Surgery Center and CCDV Holdings LLC. Just to explain, CCDV Holdings, I'm joined by my principal and my client, Dr. Dane Pullman, who looks like a lawyer, but is a doctor, and a principal and the owner of the building, and then also a principal and will be the operator of Revive Surgery Center. So he bought the building with CCDV and then pursued building permits to build the space out for Revive Surgery Center when we, unfortunately, of course, discovered this distance separation issue, which is where I entered the scene. I think, though, for this variance, I was thoughtful enough to keep my special exception presentation and my variance completely separate. I've been here enough to know that that's an expectation. But because our variance tonight is to a use standard, I think it is important that I give you a little background of the use, because one of your criteria G, asks whether the granting the variance will have a negative impact on the community, on the neighborhood, on the surrounding areas. And so the only way to get some feedback on that or make a decision on that is if you have an understanding of this use that we're proposing. And so as always, we start with the project location. It's between North Dixie Highway and Federal Highway on the north side of Sample Road. Something you're going to hear from me quite a bit in my variance presentation is how small and odd and non-conforming this lot is. The property was annexed in from the county maybe 15 or so years ago. And so it was developed at a time under county rules in such a way that make it entirely non-conforming under your code. No one could develop a building like this under today's code. And so that is something really important I want to emphasize at the outset because it goes to the heart of why we're seeking a variance, right? You guys know better than I do that variances typically must relate to a hardship or odd situation with a property. And the oddness or hardship here is that this is a very small property developed according to standards with a building on it that are completely non-conforming, completely grandfathered in, that make it particularly difficult from a new development or new use perspective. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but I wanted to get that out. At the beginning, as I show you this aerial with this tiny box. And so just zooming in quickly, you'll see there the existing building. You will note that the building basically takes up the entire lot, but it is attached to a parking lot to the north. And so when I was talking about the non-conforming status of the building, how this is a unique and odd situation, you'll note that there's very little landscaping. The parking is back out, which you would not allow in today's development standards, and the building is really bumped up directly onto Sample Road without any sort of setback. And so this is a very odd, antiquated development configuration of the building for a major thoroughfare like Sample Road. So with that being said, rather than me read from this, I'm going to call my client, Dr. Pullman, to tell you just briefly about what we're proposing here. Do you understand the use? So you want to come up now and introduce yourself for the record?
I'm Dane Pullman. I'm a physician here in the area. I have a medical practice. Name is Pullman Pain Associates. We've been open for about 6.5 years. Opened up in Coral Springs in October 2017. I'm double board certified in both physical medicine and rehabilitation and interventional pain management. It's myself and 2 other physicians in the group. We also have an office up in Delray Beach as well. We opened up 2 years ago. We pride ourselves in offering cutting-edge therapies for people that are looking for not very invasive options to treat pain. And
Excuse me, but can you get closer to the mic? He's
Yes,
having
ma'am.
a hard time.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you.
So we're proposing a facility that is, it's a one-room operating room facility that allows me to move forward with performing procedures that are very minimally invasive. The people are able to walk out of the facility. It's, I don't know how to put it, it's a glorified medical office, but because I have requirements to, there's a governing body that my architect can speak more about, but ACA comes in and has to, there's certain criteria that are in place for this facility that we're abiding by, and it would allow me to do the procedures that I do to help people. So,
Counselor, let's kind of move this back to the property and to.
Yes,
we're
and
here
so
for
it's going to
variance.
come full circle as to, why I was explaining the proposed use. So the proposed use will have hours of operation of 8 to 5 p.m., no weekend hours, no evening hours whatsoever. I think it's important that we understand what we're proposing here, because one of your criteria for a variance is whether the variance will have a negative impact on the neighborhood, have a negative impact on the public welfare. And so I'm going to get into this a little further, but I thought it was important that you understand the proposed use, because it goes to the heart of the variance. So I'll show you that now. And so our variance request very specifically is a variance to allow a specialty medical facility to be located 0 feet from residential zoning where 500 is required. That is our request. Here is a zoning map showing what created this issue, and then again evidencing the odd situation with this property. So you'll note here that the B zoning in red, where this property is located, B3, is exceptionally narrow where my client's property is. It is less than 100 feet of depth for that lot before it becomes residential zoning. And so this is a very odd development situation. You typically would not see a lot that is 80 feet wide and only 100 feet deep for a B3 zoned area. Typically, you'd see substantially more depth to allow for parking and buffering and perhaps enough space to accommodate with the code requirement. And so I'm going to go through the criteria as I always do, but the first one is whether there is a site condition or an issue with the property that creates a hardship with complying with the code. And so the existing zoning here, which arose from the city deciding to annex the property from the county and make it non-conforming, created this condition that makes it exceptionally narrow and impossible to comply with this 500-foot requirement. You would not see modern development standards create a scenario that has a zoning district that is this narrow and backing directly up to a residential zoning. Typically, you'd see more buffering or spacing between the zoning area and then a residential area. And so again, here's an aerial showing that, where you see the B3 ends directly at the north side of the property where the residential zoning starts. Now, another thing that we're going to talk about in the criteria, which I want to touch on briefly, is impacts on the neighborhood. What we did was my client personally went door to door and knocked on every single door in the area to explain to them the proposed use, answer any questions they had, and solicit their support. And so I have copies of the numerous letters we got from all the neighbors saying they're supportive of this use because they understand it's not a drug treatment facility or some sort of medical facility that would have a negative impact on the area. Similarly, we started a change.org petition that I can also give to the board to look at, where we got hundreds of signatures of patients and people in the area saying they desperately want this use here. There's other criteria I need to address. I certainly understand that. But one of the key criteria is the impact on the neighborhood. And it's my understanding that the city of Pompano Beach created this 500-foot separation requirement for specialty medical facilities out of concern for neighboring areas. I think because they were concerned with drug treatment facilities and more high-volume medical practices, really large medical practices. In this case, we're stuck with the code as it is. We certainly understand that. We're proposing a very quiet, small use, less than 4,000 square feet, and a type of use that this neighborhood really found to be complementary to the area, and with its proximity to North Broward Medical Center, something that would really be a good option for people that have pain that would want to take advantage of these minimally invasive procedures. And so then getting to the criteria, I've spoke about them some already, but I want to go through them in detail. So the first is whether there are extraordinary exceptional conditions. And so as I said, your code actually speaks of narrowness or shallowness. And so the issue we're dealing with here very simply is the shallowness of the lot. This is a non-conforming condition because of when the property was annexed in from the county. It created a situation where you could not develop a new building on this site. Flatly, if this building were demolished, it would require variances because the minimum lot standards for B3 are that it be 10,000 feet. This lot is 8,000 feet. Similarly, the building itself, with its odd configuration behind it, just simply doesn't have enough parking other than for a use such as this. And so this is sort of the heart of our case from a variance perspective, is whether there's something unique here, whether this lot is special and suffering from a unique condition that makes compliance with the code possible. I will note that to the east and west, the depth of the B3 lots increases substantially, allowing for more reasonable development patterns in those areas. The next is just asking whether this condition I'm speaking about is a result of my client's own actions. Clearly it's not. It was annexed in from the county, and the site exists as it is. I think that the reason why there's been a real challenge in getting new development there, why we see some of these older buildings existing for such a long time, is because of these existing conditions that the property owners can't do anything about. Someone came in and said, I want to knock this down and build something new. They simply couldn't without getting a whole litany of variances from this board. And then the next criteria follows and asks whether these conditions effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the land. And so I think I've spoken about this already, but in this case, it would be impossible to comply with this 500-foot depth requirement, the 500-foot distance separation requirement, because the B3 zoning literally backs up to a street that is zone residential, meaning the B3 zone here is 100 feet. It's 100 feet of depth total, so it would be an impossibility to comply with this, which is why we're here asking for this variance. The next asks whether this would confer a special privilege on the landowner that is denied to others. As I said, I believe if someone was seeking to redevelop this site, they would have to get variances. But in this case, we're not asking for a special privilege. We're simply asking to accommodate the development constraints of a very odd, old, non-conforming site. Criteria E, of course, is asking whether this is the minimum necessary. This one I think is fairly self-evident. The site exists as it is. We're asking for the basic variance that will allow this use. There's no more or no less. If there were any way for us to comply more with the requirement or increase the distance separation, we would, but we're taking an existing building and trying to repurpose it. The variance is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this code and preserves its spirit. I think the fact that my client went door to door and spoke to all the neighbors to make sure that they were comfortable with this use should give the board some comfort if it decides to grant this variance. Similarly, I can tell you my experience as a zoning attorney, these sort of annex lots from the county, Palm Beach and Broward County, regularly create these development challenges. They regularly require someone along the way coming in and asking for a variance. And so the procedures in your code to seek a variance, allowing this here would support that. As I said, this is an incredibly challenged site that flatly couldn't be redeveloped in its existing configuration. And so granting this variance here, supporting a community-serving use, something that that we can tell from our outreach is something that the community wants to see here, this variance would certainly be in harmony with the intent of the code. And then this is why I had my client, I expected Chairman Yaffe to sort of ask us to stay focused here when we were talking about my client's use. The reason why I thought it was important is, one, so you know the background of this and the project as a whole, but more importantly, this is one of our criteria, is whether granting this variance will have a negative impact on the neighborhood, public welfare, things of that nature. So I thought it was important that the board know that it's our understanding there is not a minimally invasive surgical center in the vicinity or a few miles, I believe, of this proposed site. That we heard from lots and lots of patients of my client, that they really want this use here, that they live in the area and don't want to drive as far. And when we were speaking with neighbors, they said, oh, okay, well, we're happy it's not a drug rehab. We understand that concern. We definitely want to see this there. In fact, we heard from some of the neighbors specifically that they understood a restaurant or a bar or other late nighttime uses could go there, and they were happy to see that our hours will be restricted to 5 p.m. and have no weekend hours, and thought this would be a welcome addition to their neighborhood. And then finally, the last criteria is whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. We identified in our justification statement some of the policies in the comprehensive plan that we're confident this variance would be consistent with. I think that the comprehensive plan wants to encourage redevelopment, reinvestment in some of these older sites. Similarly, the comprehensive plan wants to make sure there are adequate facilities and medical options for residents of the city. And so granting this variance will allow my client to open for business in this location and provide this service that really helps a lot of people in pain avoid opiate use with minimally invasive procedures that people can get up and leave that day and not live in pain. One other thing I want to add, got a little turned around here because my presentation for the special exception was going to go first, but we did the variance first. I want to, if you can give me 1 second, I just want to show you the site plan. Here is the proposed site plan, floor plan for that matter. What you see in the blue part is a proposed medical office that is permitted by right. My client intends to operate a standard medical office there that requires no special approvals other than a building permit. As my client briefly alluded to, the surgical center, which is in green, which is give or take 3,500 to 3,700 square feet, what bumped us into this category of specialty medical facility is not how big the facility is, it's not how intense the facility is, rather state regulatory requirements for us to do the procedures that we want to do there bumps us into that category. And so unfortunately, this is what necessitated that. But I just wanted to show that it's a split floor plan. And so my client is hoping to have sort of 2 offices in this space. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to make the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Does the board have questions at this point? Go ahead. In fact, let me just have one staff question. Scott, this is B3.
Correct.
And I understand that if we want to rebuild something in this property because of size, dimensions, what have you, it might require a variance. Is that correct? Let's run with that for a minute.
Yeah, you mean if the existing building were demoed and
What else could we use that property for?
the permitted uses in B3 range dramatically from a bar to restaurant to, let's see, golf driving range, not that that could fit in the building. But general retail is the biggest thing. A lot of personal services, uses, that sort of thing. All of those, of course, are contingent on parking requirements, and this site does have parking in the back that's connected.
And most of the uses you were indicating, would many of them, in your thought, require variances?
They,
Typical B3?
some of the uses require, well, the uses I mentioned are permitted by right, subject to
Right.
compliance with, minimum parking requirements, and some may have additional landscaping standards
But
above.
they're approved, they're permitted by right.
Correct.
There's no additional variances requirement.
Unless they need,
in the B3.
parking or what have you, yeah.
Question, sir?
Yeah. My question would be, so you went around and asked people, about the houses. So I see there's like a little over 100 houses. Was there any negative on people asking? Like, did they say, that they didn't want it, or? I know you can lie to me.
We were very surprised. There was nothing negative whatsoever.
Okay.
The only thing we heard from a few people was, well, I don't want to sign a paper, I don't, because we have these packets of letters that I'd be happy to share with you. I'm sure you've seen them before. But they're letters from people saying we're fully supportive of this and want to invite this here. We didn't have one negative person. We had some people saying, I don't want to sign a letter, knocking on my door. People don't knock on doors so much in this day and age.
Okay, my other one.
But the feedback when Dr. Pullman spent time with them, saying, this is what I want to do here, this is the issue I ran into, and I want to see if you're supportive of it. Their response was, in general, well, there's all these other things that can go here. We definitely want this. This is way better. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Is there going to be any medicine, needles, medicine meaning, drugs are going to be supplied there? Needles that are going to be there to be taken away, disposal, any of that? I don't know what you're doing exactly.
Medical waste?
Medical waste.
Typical,
Right,
sorry,
medical waste.
Special, that's
typical medical waste like any medical facility would have. Even my current offices that are medical offices have typical, and there's standards or protocols you have to remove that waste. That's very
Right.
standard.
Drugs in the
Absolutely no
facility?
dispensing of medications. This is not a drug
No.
facility
Okay,
at all.
that's
not
my
what this
biggest.
is. Yeah. So.
Okay.
This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support of the applicant? Come on up. You're good right at that microphone, if you don't want to have to go too far.
Go ahead, Richard. Go to that microphone.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, and thank you for the privilege of being able to speak this evening. This is Gwendolyn Lees and Richard Lees. We reside at 620 Southeast 5th Terrace in Pompano Beach, Florida. We've been residents here in Pompano for 30 years, and we are here tonight in support of Dr. Pullman and his practice. My husband Richard and I have been patients and are patients of Dr. Pullman's for a number of years now. I wanted to address also the issue about traffic and patients in the parking lot. At any time when I've ever been there, I've never seen more than 5 patients, 5 cars in the parking lot at any given time. We personally believe that Dr. Pullman and his practice would be a great asset to Pompano Beach and to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in support of the applicant? Hearing none. Anyone in opposition to the applicant? Again, hearing none. Board have any additional questions? All right. Closing comments, Counselor?
Closing comments. The only closing comments I would have is that This is a fairly unique situation for there to be a building on a major thoroughfare that has such little depth, that has residential abutting it so closely, and then this use requirement that makes it impossible to comply with. And so repurposing this facility with the use that we hear from many in the community that they want, this is a good case for a variance because it will allow for reinvestment in this building and a really important type of medical office in this area, and address a situation with a very odd, very narrow type of building, lacking in depth. And so with that being said, we respectfully request approval of the variance.
Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. Board discussion? Well, I'll pop in.
Mr. Chair, oh, you.
Yeah, this is not the first variance of this type that we've had for, a medical practice. We had one, and my timing may be off, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. It was one that's in the city center.
Yes.
And the closest residential property was literally across Federal Highway behind a retail strip. That was how close it was. After that, we looked at one that was in West Marine, about the 900 block or 1,000 block of North Federal Highway. And they were immediately behind that. And there were, again, I forget exactly, Scott, how many households were involved there?
There were 4 or 5. They went to the one by the city center.
No, that was, yeah, okay, no, the one by West Marine.
Oh, yeah, there were a couple dozen, I believe.
So considerably less than what we're talking about here. And I really don't see, the applicant in the presentation said that they could, if they moved a little bit to the east or a little bit to the west, they could find just the kind of property they're looking for. And I don't see where the applicant has given us, I don't see the hardship. The hardship, what I'm hearing is the hardship is the fact that the applicant can't can't use the property for what he wants. That's the hardship. I don't really hear a hardship that says it's too big, it's too small. No, it's just in the wrong zoning area. And so it's not allowed to be there, and that creates the hardship. It's sort of a little bit, in my mind, a little circular logic. But anyway, in any event, I think I've made my point. I don't see the hardship. It's simply a question, like we've seen many times before, where someone wants to put a business or something in an area that just doesn't accommodate it. So with that, I'll take any other comments or call the roll. Make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, in planning and zoning case number 23-11000020, I move we find that there is competent sufficient evidence in the record that all the requirements for granting the variance have been met, and that we grant the variance subject to the conditions requested by staff.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Please call the question.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
James Bunn,
No.
Joe Circuzzi,
No.
Ray Lebomsky,
No.
Linda Thomas,
No.
Dan Yaffe.
No. Sorry, you're denied. Counselor, do you want to, I guess we're going to have you withdraw the,
No, we'd like to move forward. We think that the special exception can be conditioned on a code amendment,
conditioned on what?
on obtaining a code amendment for this.
Why don't you have a code amendment first before you come back on this?
Well, we have to go through both anyway, and we've already submitted this application.
Scott, talk to me.
It's the applicant's right if they want to go forward, so, with the special exception. And with one of the condition is to either successfully obtain relief through a variance or other means. If the code were to change, then that condition would be satisfied, so. We can defer to council, but I believe that they can proceed.
The applicant does have the right to go forward with the special exception. The variance has nothing to do with them going forward to pursue the use of the parcel as they've proposed.
Well, there you have it. My two experts say we go forward. First time we've ever had this question, so thank you for bringing it forward to us.
Sure, so you want to,
Let me just call the case, and then
great.
we can move it forward. This is a special exception request for CCDV Holdings, P&Z 23-170001. Counselor, we're back.
Thank you very much. Matthew Scott here again for the applicant. So this.
Well, just identify yourself and have.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, this is a de novo hearing.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. The applicant landowner is requesting special exception approval as required by Section 155-4209B1, where the districts were permitted of the city's zoning code in order to utilize the subject property for a specialty medical facility. The property is located on the north side of East Sample Road and on the east side of Northeast 13th Terrace. The applicant is proposing an ambulatory surgical center in an existing office building along East Sample Road. The building was constructed in 1986 when zoning and building permits were under the purview of Broward County. The property was annexed into the city as part of the 2004 Pompano Beach Highlands annexation via Resolution 2004-323. The applicant's narrative states ambulatory surgical facility will provide minimally invasive outpatient procedures to treat a variety of orthopedic conditions. Staff has categorized this use as a specialty medical facility, which requires special exception approval in the B3 zoning district. As I mentioned previously, the BCA tax folio ID for the property includes a parking lot behind the building, which is zoned RS4. However, the proposed medical use itself will be conducted wholly within the existing building. No significant changes to the site are proposed. However, a building permit, BP 23-3882, to remodel and convert the interior of Suite 102 for this medical use is currently in plan review. The facility will comprise approximately 3,764 square feet. A specialty medical facility has a parking requirement of 1 space per 200 square feet of floor area for treatment, plus 1 space for 300 square feet for the remaining areas. With 8 parking spaces fronting the west side of the building along Northeast 13th Terrace, and an additional 16 spaces in the parking lot behind the building, the site has sufficient parking for the proposed use. Parking and building square footage breakdowns are detailed in the conceptual site plan submitted with this application. There are 3 use-specific standards for a specialty medical facility, and the applicant is seeking relief on one of them through variance application PZ 23-11-000020. Specifically, the applicant needs relief from the minimum 500-foot separation distance from a single-family residential zoning district. There are 13 special exception review standards. They are noted in the staff report. The applicant has addressed each of these, and as currently submitted, the proposed use does not meet the review standard C, and that is complies with all applicable use-specific standards in Article 4 use standards. Specifically, as we already noted, the proposed use is located on a property that's within 500 feet from a single-family residential zoning district, which conflicts with provision 155-4209B3A. However, the applicant has submitted this variance application requesting relief from this provision. Should the board determine the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence sufficient to satisfy the 13 special exception review standards, staff requests the board include the following conditions as part of the order. One is to successfully obtain relief for a variance from the separation requirement from an RS zoning district, and the second requested condition is obtain all necessary governmental approvals and permits, including zoning use certificate and a business tax receipt for the use. And that concludes staff's report. And I just want to note for the record that if the variance was denied, there are other avenues, such as a text amendment, which, if approved by Planning and Zoning Board and the City Commission, to eliminate the separation distance requirement. Therefore, if the special exception is approved, then this could go forth. But that would take several months.
Scott, just so we understand, if a year from now, 2 years from now, we change the code,
Yes.
say it's not immediate, and the special exception, does this special exception stay on the record, or is it something that would expire?
A special exception expires within 2 years if a zoning compliance permit is not obtained by then or a business tax receipt. However, there are avenues, as I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, through executive order extensions and so forth.
But typically, our orders are going to last for 2 years.
Right, typically they do. And if, again, if this is approved and there's not a text amendment or there's no way to meet that separation requirement, then even if you approve this, it becomes null and void. So but you still can approve the use conceptually, it just wouldn't be able to happen until that
Thanks for explaining
standard
that.
is met. Yeah.
Counselor?
Yes, and so I think it's helpful if I explain why we're proceeding tonight rather than withdrawing. My understanding is there has been some discussion. The chairman correctly noted that you've seen this type of application before, and that there is some discussion that the way the specialty medical facility use provisions in your code are drafted are overly onerous in some respects, that they're prohibiting uses that we're not sure, as the city's not sure that they want to be prohibiting. That perhaps the specialty medical facility was targeted for larger medical facilities that are intense or drug treatment facilities. And the way codes work sometimes is that sometimes they're drafted for one purpose and have unintended consequences. And so the reason why I'm even moving forward with this is my thought process is we would request special exception approval with an added condition that we obtain a code amendment. And so the thinking there is we get the blessing from the Zoning Board of Appeals as to all the other criteria, this condition that we need to modify this one use standard, or else it's not possible for us to open for business. And so we thought that would be a more efficient way to proceed.
Mr. Chair, if I may, in all deference to Mr. Scott, my recommendation would be that whatever order this board comes forward with, the conditions as proposed by staff would remain the same. Whatever alternatives that the applicant chooses, should it be approved, will be solely, and they're varied, that will be solely within the hands of you or your client, rather than making that a part of any kind of condition you choose to go otherwise. So staff has already proposed one particular condition that would be absolutely necessary, and that condition can be met however you choose to move forward with that. From a legal perspective, I think that's the better route than to add an additional condition that may hamstring you later on.
Understood. So I'm going to try to go quickly because I think it's, while this is de novo in a sense, I'm confident the board is familiar with what we're proposing. It's a specialty medical facility taking an existing building, using a small part of it for a permitted medical office, and then about 3,700 square feet for this specialty medical facility. And so with the special exception application, of course, there's more of a focus on what the actual use is going to be. And so here are some facts about my client and then what we're proposing here. So we're looking to add an ambulatory surgical center to a portion of the existing building. And what we're looking to do is provide quick and efficient access to minimally invasive outpatient procedures to treat a variety of orthopedic and nerve conditions. As I said in my prior presentation, this is going to be a low-volume facility, and so we're here in part largely because of insurance and ACA requirements. So other regulatory agencies bump this type of operation into a special medical facility, even though, as you heard from my client, as he testified, sort of a glorified medical office. The hours would be 8 to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, and all patients are able to get up and leave after the procedures. So there's no overnight stays whatsoever, and it's the kind of thing that people come in for that much-needed pain relief, looking to avoid prolonged use of prescription medications. And then finally, when we do special exceptions, there's always a question whether there's a demonstrated need. So it's important that we add that as far as our research goes, there is not a similar facility in Pompano Beach or the surrounding area. Here's an image of the building, just to get some of the context. I spoke a lot about the non-conforming status, and so we're looking to repurpose this building with the proposed medical office uses.
Do you own the billboard?
No, sir. It's off our property. It's to the east.
I'm sorry?
Further to the east. And so then here's the site plan again. The green area that you see on the left side, which would be the north side, is proposed landscaping improvements. So while there isn't a lot of space for that, we are making some improvements to the exterior, painting the building, things of that nature. And then I think community outreach and support, I mean, honestly, in this day and age, it's quite literally critical for every single land development application. But in this case, our outreach was particularly robust. My client went and knocked door to door and created this map and list that I was particularly impressed with, because he spent an entire day walking door to door and talking to lots of people and educating them about his use. What we're proposing here, as I said in my prior presentation, the feedback was exceptionally positive. And so here is a slide showing your special exception view standards. I provided a green check to identify the criteria that I think we clearly and obviously comply with. The asterisk is meant to identify the one criteria with which we don't comply with all the standards. This is what the variance was for, and that's so the only item on your criteria that we don't comply with whatsoever. Everything else we do comply with. The only one we don't is the separation of 500 feet from residentially zoned properties. So every single other criteria we clearly comply with. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, complies with all applicable zoning district standards. We meet parking requirements. This is repurposing an existing facility with a community serving use. These are clearly things that the comprehensive plan and the zoning code want to promote. I did say that the property is grandfathered in, has a lot of non-conforming features, but as such, that makes it compliant with the zoning district standards. As far as avoiding overburdening the available capacity of existing public facilities and services, this is going to be a very quiet medical facility that is not going to overburden any of existing public facilities, traffic, potable water, things of that nature. Is it appropriate for its location? Is compatible with the general character of the neighboring lands? There are quite a few medical offices in this area. There are a lot of general retail uses. As Scott noted, B3 zoning is looking to encourage the most intense type of commercial uses. And our community outreach, I think, evidences that the community is okay with this, and taking an existing building and repurposing it as a sort of low-volume medical office is consistent with the general character of the area. The next criteria, I think, is really meant for uses that have an outdoor component. The proposed use is going to be entirely indoors. There's going to be no odors, no noise, nothing perceptible from outside of the building whatsoever. Refuse collection is going to be sort of standard medical waste and standard trash. The size of the building alone, the size of the use, 3,700 square foot, and the fact that they're not going to see all that many patients there would be some sort of compelling evidence that they're not going to create a large amount of waste or noise. And then the next criteria is similar in that it asks whether we're going to screen, buffer, or otherwise minimize adverse visual impacts. There will be no adverse visual impacts whatsoever because everything's going to be happening indoors. Similarly, I think the next criteria, there's just no real impact here. And the next one about convenient ingress and egress, everything is staying the same. Nothing about ingress and egress and parking is changing with the proposed use. And then allows for the protection of property values and the ability of neighboring lands to develop uses permitted. I think as evidenced by our community outreach, the community thinks this would be a good thing here, in particular in comparison to a restaurant or a bar or a nightclub, a lot of more intensive uses that would have a negative impact on the area. The other criteria that next would be that it fulfills a demonstrated need for the public convenience. As I said earlier, our research indicates there is not a minimally invasive surgery center in the city of Pompano Beach. You heard from, which I'd like to adopt for this presentation, some members of the community that they really want this here, and our letters of support evidence that as well. The next criteria is whether we comply with all relevant city, state, and federal laws. That's a given. That we're here, in fact, because of the state-driven licensure procedures. And then the next criteria just speaks about where we should look for neighborhood impacts. And so the map I showed you is a 500-foot radius that we used, so the doors that my client went and knocked on were within that 500-foot radius. And so here's the sticking point, right? Here is the issue with why we had to ask for a variance. There are 3 specific use standards for a specialty medical facility. First is the separation of residential uses, so the variance was denied. And so we need to figure out other relief for that if the special exception is approved. With regard to overnight treatment, as I stated in my presentation, and be happy to have as a condition, that there will be no overnight treatment whatsoever. There will be no patients staying overnight. And then finally, the hours of operation. This is easy for us to comply with because our proposed hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Thank you for allowing me to do another presentation. I hope it wasn't too repetitive or boring. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Does the board have any immediate questions? This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support? Hearing none. Does anyone in the audience?
Is your microphone on, Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry.
Microphone.
Late in the meeting?
Thank you.
Christmas time, you know. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in support of the applicant? Hearing none. Does anyone wish to speak in opposition?
The members that spoke before for the variance are happy to speak again if the board would like to hear from them again.
Their call.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, you have to go through the whole, give me your name, address, and tell me you've been sworn again. It's a different case.
Richard Lees, 620 Southeast 5th Terrace, Pompano Beach. I've been a resident for 30 years, and yes,
But have you been sworn in, Mr. Lees?
Yes, I've been sworn in.
Okay, keep going.
Yes, I've been sworn in. Okay. You heard my wife speak before, and I ditto everything that she said before. And from what I can understand and what's needed, and the residents in the area seem that they have no objection to it. And I would think that the city would prefer to have a very low-use activity place there instead of a bar or a restaurant, which it could have there now. So I'm speaking in behalf, not only as a patient of Dr. Pullman, but as a resident. And if I lived in that area, I would definitely prefer having this type of a use there versus a bar or a restaurant or something like that. So I would ask that the zoning board seriously consider that and approve the specialty exception. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak in support? Or in opposition? Or in general? Okay. Counselor? On you. Does the board have any questions? On you.
Nothing else to add. We've heard enough of
Okay.
us on this. Thank you.
Thank you. This public hearing is now closed. Board discussion. I just want to add something. You know, I spoke earlier, you know, and maybe a little emphatically about not approving the variance. And that was basically because I don't want to take away rights from, you know, 400 some odd houses or whatever, a couple hundred houses, you know, to give it to somebody else. However, and I would say, and I would do the same thing again, that being because I'm a Grinch, I have no opposition for this special exception. If you can get the city to come up with another way through code amendment, I have no problem. You know, I'm not going to stop or you know, medical treatments in our city. Where you can do it, yeah, that's sometimes you got to stop that. But if you can get the code amendment, we'll support this. So, anyway, further discussion, motions?
I'll make a motion. In P&Z case number 23-17000011, I move we find there is competent and substantial evidence in the record that all the requirements for granting the special exception have been met, and that we grant the special exception subject to the conditions requested by staff.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Martha, please call the roll.
Charlotte Burry,
Yes.
Linda Thomas,
Yes.
James Bunn,
Yes.
Joe Circusi,
Yes.
Ray Lebomsky,
Yes.
Dan Yaffe.
Yes. Happy? All right, is there anything else before us?
Do we want to recall
Yeah,
the?
I emailed the applicant. I guess there was a miscommunication.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so-
and why don't we make a motion to table?
Yeah.
Okay, in item number, give me a second,
Number
guys.
2, I think it is. I'm getting confused. Item number 2.
Wait a minute, two?
No,
No,
number
it's
4.
It's 4. Item number 4, a variance from Kimberly Villela Perez, P&Z 23-110019, to table to the meeting of January 18th at 6 PM.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we...
Good, you moved. Thank you. Do I have a
I
second?
move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Before we take a motion to adjourn, I just want to wish everybody a very wonderful, happy, and healthy holiday, and wish you good fortune and good cheer. And we'll see you back on
Next
January
year.
18th, 6
Next
PM.
year, yes.
Take care. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.